he has complete confidence in this young man. And so he has no problem sending him, ministering on his behalf. So he makes known, that's the first person he mentions, and we'll look at some other ones, but once again, he pays a lot of attention to this young man who we hear very seldom of. And can I tell you, there's a lot of people who serve in ministries that you don't hear a lot about, but God knows what they're doing, and they're faithful, and they live out their faith on a regular basis, and they do a lot of things behind the scenes, and they rarely get any attention. They don't even want it. They just want to serve. And Tychicus may be one of these guys, listen, I'm just here to serve. I don't care if my name's mentioned or not. Paul mentions twice, but outside these 2 times, we don't hear anything about him. But Paul says, well, listen, let me tell you some things. He's beloved and faithful and a fellow servant. He means the world to me. The world may not know a lot about him, but God sure does. And he's got rewards in heaven because he served faithfully in the things that he did. We're going to go back to Colossians. He's going to mention another individual, 4:9 of Colossians. Onesimus. He's a faithful and beloved brother who's one of you. They will make known to you all things that are happening here. So Onesimus, you think, Onesimus. I've heard that name before, right? Yeah, you have. You've heard it from Philemon. Paul wrote a letter to Philemon about Onesimus. See, Onesimus was that runaway slave that Paul sent a letter about. And while he was sent to Paul, if you know anything about it, if you read through the book of Philemon, it's only 1 chapter long. So you think, I've never read that one. I don't know why. It's only 1 chapter. So you say, hey, I read a whole chapter today. It's not very long. You read through it, but you find out about it. Okay, and Onesimus was this man that he just didn't like the circumstances of life. He didn't start out well. He started out as a runaway slave. He just took off. Didn't like his master, didn't like the situation in life, decided he was just going to just take off. Well, what he didn't know was he's going to run into someone called Paul. Paul meets him, leads him to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and his whole life is transformed. And that's what that letter to Philemon is he says, listen, I know he wasn't profitable before, but now that he knows Jesus, he's a different person than he was. And we can all test that, because Onesimus is, listen, he's a living testimony of what the gospel can do in someone's life. You may not start out well, but you can end well with Jesus Christ. You may start out on a bad note, but you can end up well. I mean, my life didn't start out well. I started out as kind of a little bit of a wild man, and I met Jesus, and my whole life changed, and Onesimus has the same thing going on, and he lets him know. If you look at Philemon with me, chapter 1, there's only 1 chapter, right? Verse 10, 11, look what he says. I appeal to you for my son Onesimus, whom I begotten while in my chains, who once was unprofitable to you, but now he is profitable to you and to me. See, people who are living for themselves really are not profitable to anyone else. If they're self-centered, they're shallow, if they're greedy, but when they come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and their heart is transformed and they pass from death to life and they start seeing things from God's perspective instead of their own, they become profitable. And that's what Paul says about this man. He didn't start out well. He started out as a runaway, escaping, and then he met Jesus Christ, and now he's profitable to you and to me. His life has been changed by the power of the gospel. Someone told him a story that Jesus Christ loved. He said, Onesimus, Paul, I can imagine Paul sitting and saying, Onesimus, where are you from? Well, I'm, from Colossae. Well, what are you doing? Running away. What? Why? I didn't like the way things were going. I don't know, it wasn't going anywhere. I didn't like what I was doing. And I suppose that somewhere along the line said, Paul, or Onesimus, anyone ever tell you about Jesus Christ? No. See, he's God's son. He loved you so much, he died for you, Onesimus. He died on a cross for your sins. Everything you've done wrong, he died on a cross and paid for. 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Did anyone ever tell you that before? No. Well, do you believe that, Onesimus, that God loves you so much he sent his son to die for you? That he rose from the dead on the 3rd day? And somewhere along the line, Onesimus said, yeah, I do. Would you like to receive him right now? Yes, I would. And he came to know Christ as a Savior. And after having an encounter with Christ, he wasn't the same as he was before. His life had been transformed. And he once was not worth much, and now he is. He said, listen, he wasn't profitable before, but now that he knows Jesus Christ, he's not the same person. So he mentions this gentleman, Onesimus. And he's profitable to you and to me. Because I tell you, the power of the gospel changes lives and making someone who is worthless someone who is worth a lot. And that's what he does. Colossians 4:10. Aristocratus. You think that'll hurt yourself if you say it wrong. Aristocratus. My fellow prisoner greets you. You got to like that, right? Paul's incarcerated. My fellow prisoner. Someone who's incarcerated with Paul. So Aristocratus, my fellow prisoner, greets you with Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about who you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. Now we're going to look at these two individuals. You're going to see some things about him, and there's both written about these individuals, but honestly, we don't hear a lot about Aristocratus. You just don't hear a lot about him. You don't hear his name mentioned too much. You see him here, you'll see him in another book, but these are individuals that Paul's talking about that other people don't know. They're not mentioned in the Gospels a lot. They're mentioned just one or two times. And he says, my fellow prisoner. He uses that title. He's with Paul, right? He's willingly in prison with Paul. And then he mentions Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. Now, Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary gives Aristocratus, it gives a little snippet about him. I want to share that with you. A faithful companion and friend, Aristocratus accompanied Paul to Rome, where he attended to the apostle and shared in his imprisonment. So Aristocratus willingly went to prison with Paul to make sure his needs were met while he was there. Think, wow. What a unique calling. I mean, how would it be if one of your best friends were going to jail and said, can I go with you? Sure. No. Because he would have freedom and said, I want to just go there with you and I want to help you in prison. When Paul wrote the letters from the jail cell, it's very likely Aristocratus would be the one to go get the parchment for him and get the pens and bring it back to him so he could write the gospel and send it to others. Now, you don't hear too much about him. But the things he did behind the scenes and how he attended to Paul when he was incarcerated, someone had to go get supplies for him. Why wouldn't it be someone like him, who is a faithful servant who willingly went with Paul to accompany him and help him when he's incarcerated for no other reason than sharing the gospel? That's someone who's faithful, and that's why it makes this statement on him. He says, listen, he was a faithful companion and friend. Because listen, a lot of you know, and if you've ever been in jail, only your friends come visit you and contact you. That's it. A lot of people forget about you if you go to jail for a long period of time. But here, this gentleman, he's mentioned, and Paul says, listen, this is one of my stand-up guys. And once again, we may have some of these letters because of work behind the scenes that he did for Paul and took care of his needs and got him supplies that he needed so he could minister to others. Now he mentions, not only does he mention, and we're going to look at one more passage, Acts 19:29, because you see Aristocratus here too. And this happens, someone that goes through hard times with you and stands with you afterwards, you got to be a great person. So look at Acts 19:29, because this gentleman traveled with Paul on his third missionary journey, and it went kind of south at the end. So Acts 19:29. So the whole city was filled with confusion and rushed into the theater with one accord, having seized Gaius and Aristocratus, the Macedonians, Paul's traveling companions, his traveling companions. So you had these two people, traveling companions with Paul on his third missionary journey, and they grabbed him during the middle of a riot. They grabbed these two individuals, and Paul wasn't even there. Paul wanted to go in. They said, Paul, don't you do it. They'll kill you. Don't do it. But they got Aristocratus. They got Gaius. Said, that's all right. God will take care of them, but we need you here. So he wanted to go in. They wouldn't let him. And a riot started. Another man got up and just talked to him and said, listen, calm down. Guys, calm down. Ain't nothing bad happening here. There's courts. If you want to pursue that, you're not going to start a riot. You're going to stir up Rome. If Rome comes over here, we're all going to be in trouble, so you better just be quiet. If you have anything to take to trial, take it through the proper channels, and let's move on from here. So you had someone come up and give that speech, and they all departed. But here's two people caught in the middle of a riot, traveling with Paul. And if they go through something like that, I mean, not all mission trips end well. You know that, right? Some people go on mission trips, and unfortunately, some of them don't come back from mission trips. It just doesn't end well all the time. So if you travel with someone, you face some uncertain dangers sometimes. I remember our very first mission trip. I was thinking, this could not end well, folks. So we went to Haiti in our very first mission trip. The year I got saved, we went on a mission trip to Haiti. It might have been the 91. I got saved in 91, somewhere around there. We go to Haiti to put a roof on a building that had been sitting here 7 years. The walls were up and no roof on it. We thought, I'm a carpenter. I can build a roof. So I was so excited about going on this mission trip, and I wanted to go, and I went, but no one told me what to expect when we got off the plane in Dominican Republic. No one told me. We had this plane that landed. It was a smaller plane, the one they have to take that stairwell and move it up to planes and get out, and there's not a lot of room on a platform when they pull it up and you get out of the plane, and the platform's just like a 4x4 box, and you go downstairs where there's a guard standing there with a Uzi. And no one told me that when you got off the plane, there's going to be a guard with a Uzi that's going to speak in a foreign language and ask you questions. I didn't know that. So I get off there, and first of all, I remember that hot wind. Just, and then I was like, ooh, there's a guard with a Uzi. And he goes, it's like, yeah. And then I was thinking, that was kind of stupid. He could have said, you want me to shoot you in the head? Yep. I didn't even know what he said, and I was agreeing with him. I thought, that could not end well. And it did. It went fantastic. 10 people went. 8 people got sick. Me and one other person didn't, by the grace of God. But it was just one of those times when you go on there, you think, you know what? Sometimes you think missions are all just fun and games, just to go have fun. But I'm telling you, there's times people go on mission trips and they don't come back. There's times they die in a mission field. There's times they get sick. There's times that they could be killed. There's times that people don't like Christians, and they take them. And some mission agencies have this policy: if you're kidnapped, we will not pay a ransom for you. You have to sign off on that. And think, well, that sounds kind of cruel. Listen, if they start paying ransom for missionaries, they kidnap them all the time. You have to make sure that if I go on the mission field, I understand if they kidnap me and demand money, we're not giving it to them, and you may die over there. Are you willing to do that before you leave? Well, you look at this gentleman. He said, I'm in, Paul. I'm all in. Well, you might be caught in the middle of a riot. I don't care. And he was taken there, and he knew there were risks to be taken if he traveled with Paul. Paul was a wanted man. You understand, a lot of people wanted to kill Paul. A lot. So if you're traveling with someone that's hated, understand that you might go down just as being associated with him. So that's what happens. In Aristocrus, there he is. He travels with him. And he mentions another individual in that statement also in verse 10. With Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about who you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. And he had to put that in there, and I'll tell you why. See, he didn't start out well. John Mark didn't start out well. Now, he ended well, he just didn't start out well. When Paul and Barnabas, see, they were at this church in Antioch. They're going there in a worship service, and during the worship service, the Spirit of God said this: set aside for me Paul and Barnabas for the work I've called them to. So Paul and Barnabas, missionaries, called together, right? Well, Barnabas says, hey, John Mark, you want to go with us? Or he invited John Mark, or John Mark invited himself. I don't know how it happened. But John Mark went with him. Now follow me. The Spirit of God said, set aside Paul and Barnabas. He didn't mention John Mark. But John Mark went. Well, on the first missionary journey, they're going a little bit into it, and all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, John Mark said, I'm going home. And Paul said, what? So I'm going home. I don't like this. This is weird. I ain't eating that stuff. And whatever it is, we didn't know what it was, but John Mark left during the first missionary trip. And partly because the Spirit of God didn't say set him aside. But he went, and he left. Now, can I tell you, this rubbed Paul all sorts of the wrong way. Paul did not like it a bit. Matter of fact, after they got back on the first missionary journey, and Paul and Barnabas decided to go back and check up on all the church they planted, they're going to go on their second missionary journey. As they get ready to leave, Paul says, Barnabas, hey, why don't we go out and check on the churches? Hey, that's a great idea. I'll go get my cousin John Mark. And Paul says, excuse me? Yeah, John Mark, you remember? He went, yeah, I remember him. Remember, he left us. He left us. In the middle of the work, he left us and went back home. Yeah, but we need to take him. He said, no. He's not coming. Barnabas said, but I really want him to come. Paul said, I don't care what you want. He's not getting on my boat. See, Paul, come on. I'm serious. I'm not taking him with us. and they got into a heated argument on the